The room went still after the line. There are no remaining authority designations in your name. Then someone laughed, not cruel, knowing. I'm Serafina Croft, 78 years old, retired archivist, foundation builder, hospital benefactor, and according to the woman standing beside my hospital bed, completely delusional. Have you ever been dismissed as confused when you knew the truth? Have you watched someone perform concern while dismantling your life? That's exactly what was happening in that pale yellow hospital room in Georgia. The antiseptic smell burned my nostrils. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like angry wasps. My IV drip felt cold against my forearm, pumping fluids into a body that wasn't sick, just tired. So tired. I tried to tell the young nurse, Davis, her name tag said, about my missing checkbook, about the blocked calls to my attorney, Warren. My voice came out weak, scratchy from days of dehydration they said was a stroke, but wasn't. She's delusional, Brenda said, patting my hand with those perfectly manicured nails. French tips. Expensive. My son Julian's widow. The stroke caused some confusion. Serafina Croft built hospitals. Now I was trapped in one. By family. I didn't explode, didn't scream or thrash or demand they listen. I counted. Pen clicks on the nurse's clipboard. 7. Distance to the door, 12 feet, maybe 13. Brenda's manicured nails against my age-spotted hands, a contrast that said everything about power and time. Nurse Davis nodded sympathetically. She believed Brenda. Why wouldn't she? Brenda wore concern like expensive perfume. Jasmine, cloying, suffocating. She had the folder, the papers, the authority. The nurse turned to leave. That's when the door opened. Mr. Coleman didn't knock. He rushed in, bypassing Brenda completely, his face drained of color. The hospital's chief executive officer. I'd never met him, didn't know his name yet, but he knew mine. Mrs. Croft? His voice trembled. He pointed toward the window, toward the main hospital entrance I couldn't see. Your portrait is still in our Miami lobby. You built our geriatric pavilion. Brenda froze. The color didn't just fade from her face, it evacuated, fled, abandoned ship. What happens when the CEO recognizes the delusional patient? Coleman stationed a security guard outside my door within minutes. His hands shook as he pulled out his phone, making calls I couldn't quite hear. But I watched Brenda, watched her leather portfolio clutch tighter to her chest, watched her jasmine confidence curdle into something that smelled more like fear. Inside that portfolio were documents. I knew it then, felt it the way you feel thunder before rain. Documents with my signature, except I'd never signed them. Brenda had been so careful. She'd chosen this hospital specifically, far from Atlanta, my home, far from Miami, where David and I had wintered for 30 years, far from anyone who knew my name, my work, my mind. She'd counted on anonymity, on a sterile room where an old woman's protests would sound exactly like confusion, where protecting assets could happen behind closed doors and sympathetic nods. But she'd made one mistake. She'd underestimated the reach of a foundation built on gratitude. If you've ever been silenced when you had proof, subscribe, because I'm about to weaponize mine. Non-subscribers, tell me below why you're waiting. Coleman returned with a patient advocate, asked Brenda to step into the hallway. For just a moment, she went, but her eyes stayed on me. A warning, a promise. We're not done. I looked at the IV in my arm, the starched sheets, the hand sanitizer dispenser by the door. Everything was white and clean and organized, a place designed for healing. Brenda had turned it into a cage. As they talked in hushed voices outside, I noticed something. My phone finally returned to my bedside table after 3 days of, "We're keeping it safe for you." I reached for it with shaking hands. 47 missed calls, all from Warren, my attorney. Every single voicemail, deleted. The tea went cold before I remembered to drink it, back when home was still home. 2 months before that hospital room. My study in Atlanta, afternoon light slanting through the windows, catching dust motes that danced between my archival shelves. Julian's death anniversary. I'd been reviewing foundation documents alone, the way I did every year on that day, remembering my son, honoring the work David and I built. Brenda arrived unannounced. "I brought tea," she said, setting a cup on my desk. Lavender. It tasted faintly metallic, but I thought maybe I'd just forgotten to rinse my morning coffee mug properly. She offered to help with paperwork, said I looked tired, should rest more, let her streamline the banking, make things easier. "You mentioned this already today," she said at one point, her voice gentle, concerned. I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. But doubt is a seed, and she was planting carefully. Ever notice something wrong but couldn't name it yet? I watched her move through my study. Too comfortable. Too familiar with where things were kept. She asked about the foundation charter, said she wanted to understand David's vision better. I showed her the binder, explained the structure, the endowment, the board. She took notes, smiled, thanked me for trusting her. But when I went to refill my tea, that cold metallic tea I never finished, I saw her. Reflected in the glass cabinet where I kept David's architectural awards. Her phone was out, camera aimed at the open binder on my desk. She was photographing pages. I didn't say anything, didn't confront her. Some instinct told me to stay quiet, to watch, to remember. That night, after she left with promises to check on me next week, I went to replace the foundation binder on its shelf. It was refiled backward, spine facing in. Someone who'd actually been helping wouldn't make that mistake. Someone studying the structure, memorizing it, planning something. They might. David's aftershave ghost still lingered in that study. 15 years gone, but his presence remained in the worn leather chair, the squeaky third drawer that he'd always meant to fix, but never did. I sat in his chair that night, opened that squeaky drawer. Inside, the original foundation documents, the real ones, the ones Brenda hadn't photographed because she didn't know they existed. I didn't understand what she was planning yet, not fully. But I knew one thing. Someone was studying my life's work, not to honor it, to dismantle it. The dust motes had stopped dancing by then. The afternoon light had gone gray, and the lavender tea sat on my desk, cold and untouched, like a warning I'd almost missed. The hospital's patient advocate brought me my personal effects in a clear plastic bag, my purse, my reading glasses, my checkbook. The checkbook was missing 3 pages. Coleman had moved me to a secure room by then, private, quiet. A place where nurses knocked before entering and didn't automatically believe I was confused. He'd pulled strings, called in favors, made it clear that Serafina Croft wasn't just any patient. I sat at the small table by the window and opened that checkbook with shaking hands. Checks 2847, 2848, and 2849, gone. Not torn out the way you'd rip a check in a hurry. Clean cuts, surgical. Someone had used a razor blade or very sharp scissors. My phone, finally truly returned, showed 17 deleted voicemails from Warren. I called him immediately. "Eleanor." His voice cracked. "I've been trying to reach you for 9 days. 9 days. That's how long I'd been in this hospital. 9 days of Brenda controlling every visitor, every phone call, every piece of information that came in or out of my room. Which evidence hits harder, forged dates or stolen checks? Coleman brought in his legal team that afternoon. That's when I met Alicia Torres. Sharp eyes, sharper questions. She didn't waste time on sympathy or small talk. "Mrs. Croft, I need you to review these bank statements." She spread them across the table. My foundation accounts. 3 transfers I'd never authorized. $18,000, $15,000, $14,000, all marked as consulting fees to something called VCF Administration LLC. I'd never heard of VCF Administration. The date stamps made my stomach drop. All 3 transfers occurred during my hospitalization. While I lay in that bed, weak and dismissed, someone was moving my money. These aren't mistakes, Alicia said, her voice level and cold. This is a blueprint. Coleman offered me coffee. I declined. My reading glasses kept fogging from exhaustion, from rage, from something I couldn't quite name yet. Not just betrayal, something more calculated. Warren arrived in person an hour later. He looked older than I remembered. Tired. Brenda told me you'd requested no contact during your recovery, he said. She said you needed space, needed to heal without legal matters stressing you. I hadn't requested anything. Brenda had built a wall around me, brick by careful brick. Warren opened his briefcase, pulled out a document I recognized immediately, the Foundation Charter, our founding document, the one David and I had signed in 1998, notarized, filed with the state, except this one was dated 2024, 1 year after David's death, with signatures that looked like mine but weren't quite right. The loops were different. The pressure was off. Eleanor, Warren said slowly, Brenda submitted this as the current charter last month, claimed she found it among your papers. It lists her as co-founder. My copy, the real one, filed in my study, said 1998, listed only David and me. Alicia leaned forward. Mrs. Croft, do you have the original documents? Signed, notarized, untouched? I smiled for the first time in weeks. I have something better. Documents lie when no one's watching. Subscribe so you catch the warning signs before they're weaponized. Alicia didn't knock the next morning. She walked into my room holding a printout, her face set in the expression lawyers get when they've found exactly what they were looking for. 2 foundation names, side by side, identical except for one letter. Vance Care Foundation, she said, pointing to the first line. That's yours, established 1998, assets approximately $3.2 million, public charity status, clean records. She moved her finger to the second line. Vance Core Foundation, established 8 months ago, Delaware registration, officers listed, B. Vance and S. Croft. My breath caught. I never signed anything for a Delaware foundation. I know. Alicia pulled out more papers. But according to these documents, you did. Transfer of intellectual property rights. Your historical archives, every collection your foundation has acquired over 26 years, now legally owned by Vance Core Foundation. The room tilted. Those archives weren't just mine. They were donated by families, Civil War letters, Reconstruction-era photographs, Jim Crow documentation, oral histories. Families had trusted me, trusted the Vance Foundation to preserve their histories forever. Predict, what's Eleanor's ace? Alicia kept going, her voice steady, methodical. I traced the money. $230,000 funneled from your accounts through VCF administration, that's the consulting company, into Vance Core. From there, transfers to a personal account in Charleston, Brenda's hometown, where she'd moved after Julian died, where she'd rebuilt a life that didn't include me except as a quarterly phone call and perfunctory holiday visits. There's more, Alicia said. Vance Core has been in contact with 3 private collectors, offering to sell portions of your archive. They've received preliminary appraisals. The Civil War correspondence alone, $1.2 million. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against the table. She's selling our history. She's trying to. Alicia's expression hardened. But she made mistakes. The signatures don't match your actual hand. The dates overlap with documented events where you were provably elsewhere. And she filed paperwork in Delaware thinking it would hide the connections. Coleman had been standing in the doorway. He stepped forward now. Eleanor, I'm moving you to our secure wing, guest suites, full privacy. And I've contacted Warren. He's bringing someone you need to meet. 20 minutes later, Warren arrived with Mr. Harrison, my attorney from Atlanta, the one who'd helped David and me establish everything back in 1998. He'd retired 5 years ago, moved to Savannah, handed our accounts to Warren. But when Warren called him about forged charters and stolen archives, he'd gotten on a plane. Eleanor. Harrison's voice was gravel and warmth. I tried calling 53 times over the last 2 weeks. Brenda said you'd requested no contact during recovery. Said you were confused and needed to avoid stress. 53 times. I wanted to cry, wanted to scream, did neither. Mr. Harrison, I said instead, my voice stronger than it had been in days. Do you still have copies of our original foundation documents? Signed, notarized, untouched? He smiled, pulled a folder from his briefcase. I have the originals. You gave them to me for safekeeping in 1998. Remember? You said, if anyone ever questions our intent, these need to be somewhere Brenda can't reach. I'd forgotten that conversation, but my past self, younger, sharper, already wary of my daughter-in-law, had planned for this moment. Alicia looked at Harrison's folder, then at me. Mrs. Croft, is there anything else? Anything that documents your competence, your authority, your intent? I smiled for the second time. I have something better. The vault box key was taped inside David's college yearbook, exactly where I'd hidden it 30 years ago. I'd almost forgotten about it. Almost. But when Alicia asked if I had documentation, proof of every decision, every donation, every moment that showed my mind was sharp and my authority was real, the memory surfaced like a lifeline. Georgia Fidelity Bank, I told Coleman's assistant. Downtown Atlanta, Vault 1847, ask for Madame Evangeline. Tell her Serafina Croft is requesting her deposit box. She'll need this key and my verbal authorization code. The code was simple. David's birthday backward, followed by the year we got married. One hidden notebook is destroying $1 million scheme. Subscribe. The next revelation drops in 48 hours. It took 6 hours to retrieve. 6 hours where Alicia prepared motions, and Warren contacted board members, and Coleman stationed security outside my door because Brenda had started calling, demanding access, threatening lawsuits, claiming I was being manipulated by opportunists. When the assistant returned, she carried a leather-bound book, water-stained cover, cracked spine. Pages yellowed at the edges but perfectly preserved. David's handwriting, my handwriting, side by side for 26 years. We'd started it after our first major donation in 1994. A retired teacher wanted to donate her grandfather's letters. He'd been a Pullman porter, traveled the country, wrote home every week for 40 years. Beautiful, ordinary history. When we accepted that collection, David said, "We need a record. Not just official documents, a real record, in case anyone ever questions what we built or why." So we created a system, a shorthand only we understood. Based on David's architecture blueprints, coordinates and angles, and my archival dating systems, initials of donors, dates of acquisitions, amounts of grants, board decisions, witness names, everything that mattered, logged in code. Alicia opened the ledger carefully, turned pages, cross-referenced with bank statements and tax records and foundation minutes. Her eyes widened. "Mrs. Croft, this is extraordinary. Every entry has a witness initial and location code. You've documented 26 years of competent decisions. Even during your hospitalization, look here, page 189. You logged a grant approval from your phone on March 14th. That's 6 days into your hospital stay." I remembered that call. Weak, but clear. Approving funds for a high school history project. Brenda had been in the bathroom. I'd made the call fast, logged it later from memory. Proof I wasn't confused, wasn't declining, was fighting even when I didn't know yet what I was fighting against. Harrison held the ledger like it was sacred text. This corroborates everything. Every signature Brenda forged, you have the real decision logged here. Every transfer she made, you have the actual authority documented. The leather smelled like David, like the cologne he wore, like the fountain pen he preferred, like 30 years of marriage and partnership and building something that mattered. My tears hit the page edges. Alicia handed me a tissue. "There's a note here," she said, pointing to page 247, David's handwriting, the last entry he'd made before he died. "If questioned, see Miami Cornerstone, witness proof embedded. Flag, Miami Cornerstone. It returns with force." I'd forgotten about the cornerstone, but David hadn't. David had planned for this exact moment, for someone trying to erase what we built. He'd left me one more weapon, one more witness, buried in stone. Coleman made 3 calls. By morning, I had 7 allies who remembered when Brenda didn't exist. Dr. Rashid called first. Director of the geriatric pavilion in Miami, the hospital David and I built. He remembered my site visit last spring, April 3rd to be exact. I'd toured the new memory care wing, given feedback on patient room layouts, discussed expansion plans. "Mrs. Croft, your mind was sharp as ever," he said over the phone. "I have photos, timestamps. You were asking detailed questions about medication protocols and staffing ratios." April 3rd. 2 weeks before Brenda started bringing me helpful tea and suggesting I rest more. Professor Linwood was next, University of Georgia History Department. I'd guest lectured his Civil War Studies class 4 months ago, talked about primary source preservation, showed students original letters from my collection. "I still have your notated lecture slides," he said. "Attendance records, student evaluations. They rated you 9.8 out of 10. One student wrote, 'Most engaged speaker we've had all semester.' 4 months ago. While Brenda was supposedly concerned about my declining memory, Callista Reed, Foundation Board member for 12 years, called in tears. 'Eleanor, I tried reaching you 17 times. Brenda said you were too confused for board business, said you'd specifically asked not to be bothered. But I have voicemails you left me. Clear, focused, discussing the scholarship fund expansion. They tried erasing me. My allies remembered. Subscribe before the courtroom reveal. It's calculated poetry. Each person provided evidence. Dated emails where I discussed complex foundation matters. Photos showing me alert and engaged. Meeting minutes with my detailed comments and questions. Phone records proving Brenda had blocked their access while telling them I wanted space. Alicia organized everything into a timeline, a map of competence that destroyed Brenda's confused elderly woman story. March 15th, I approved a $50,000 grant via detailed email to Margaret March 28th. Guest lecture at University of Georgia, rated excellent April 3rd. Miami site visit, comprehensive facility review. April 12th, phone call with Professor Linwood about archive digitization. April 19th, Brenda's first "you mentioned this twice" gaslighting attempt. May Mearned Foundation Board meeting, I participated actively via video. May 8th, Brenda photographs my documents. May 15th, I'm hospitalized with stroke confusion. The pattern was clear. I wasn't declining. I was being systematically isolated. Warren compiled everything into an emergency motion. Freeze all foundation accounts. Suspend Brenda's access. Appoint temporary oversight pending full investigation. He filed at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Motion granted at 4:17 p.m. By 4:19, Brenda's Charleston number called my hospital room. Once, twice, 10 times, 20, 46 times in 18 minutes. I watched my phone light up, ring, vibrate. Each call a little piece of her control crumbling. I didn't answer. Coleman stood in my doorway. "Should I have security block her number?" "No," I said. "Let it ring. Let her understand what it feels like when nobody picks up." "Whose testimony would you bring first?" That night, Alicia brought takeout Chinese food to my room, sat with me while we reviewed the next steps. Her confidence was steady, unshakable. "Mrs. Croft, we have her cornered. The evidence is overwhelming, but I need to know. How far do you want to take this?" I thought about David, about the families who trusted us with their histories, about every person who'd built something good and watched someone else try to steal it. "All the way," I said. "I want every forged signature documented, every stolen dollar traced, every lie exposed." Alicia smiled. Then we go to deposition next, make her answer for all of it. On the record. My phone was still ringing. 47th call, 48th. I turned it face down and ate my egg roll in peace. The geriatric pavilion's cornerstone wasn't decorative. It was a time capsule. And I held the only key code. David had designed it that way. Back in 1998, during the groundbreaking ceremony in Miami, everyone thought the cornerstone was just tradition. Bronze plaque, date, names, standard ceremony. But David was an architect. He built things to last, to mean something. We should put the originals inside, he'd said the night before the ceremony. Not copies, the real charter, our real mission statement, witness signatures, everything that matters. What if we need them? I'd asked. He'd smiled, kissed my forehead. Then we'll know exactly where they are. And Brenda won't. Even then, even 27 years ago, David had known to plan for this. Dr. Rashid coordinated the extraction, hospital facilities manager, legal observers, a crew with concrete cutting tools. They set up a video feed so I could watch from my room in Georgia. The camera showed the cornerstone, bronze plaque gleaming in Miami sunshine. Behind it, a sealed steel compartment David had custom designed, waterproof, temperature-controlled, built to preserve documents for 100 years. They needed the access code. David had written it in the ledger. Page 247. The code only made sense if you understood his blueprint notation system and my archival dating method. I gave Dr. Rashid the sequence over the phone, listened to the mechanical click as the seal released. Inside, everything. Foundation charter, original. Dated June 12, 1998, signed by David Vance and Serafina Croft, notarized by Orion Evans, witnessed by Callista Reed and Dr. Harrison, our mission statement, handwritten by both of us. David's architecture handwriting, precise, measured, my archival script, flowing, careful, photos from that day, us in hard hats, breaking ground, smiling, 27 years preserved perfectly. Coleman's hand steadied my shoulder as I watched through tears. The camera zoomed in on the charter. The date was unmistakable. The signatures were genuine. Every detail matched my ledger entries exactly. Brenda's forged charter claimed the foundation was established in 2024, claimed she was co-founder, claimed I'd transferred authority. The cornerstone proved it was all fiction. Mrs. Croft, Alicia said, watching the feed beside me, this is perfect. Physical evidence, independent witnesses, media documentation. There's no argument Brenda can make against this. The facilities manager carefully removed each document, placed them in archival sleeves, photographed every page, logged every detail. Dr. Rashid held up the mission statement to the camera. Read the final line aloud. David's handwriting, clear and strong even through video compression. Should our intent be questioned, let stone bear witness. This cornerstone was placed 27 years ago. Planning or poetry? I'd asked David once why he insisted on the sealed compartment. Why not just keep copies in a safe like normal people? Because safes can be opened by anyone with the right lawyer, he'd said. But a cornerstone, that's permanent, public, part of the building itself. Nobody can claim we changed our minds or forgot what we meant. The stone remembers. The stone remembered? Brenda had spent 8 months building her scheme, forging documents, creating shell companies, crafting the perfect theft. David had spent one afternoon in 1998 making sure she'd never succeed. The video feed ended, documents secured, evidence locked in place. Alicia's phone rang, Brenda's attorney, requesting an urgent meeting. Tell him we'll see him at deposition, Alicia said, with every document David and Serafina buried in stone. Brenda arrived in pearls and pale gray, armor disguised as elegance. The conference room was neutral territory, Atlanta law offices. Long table, 3 attorneys on her side, Alicia and Warren on mine, court reporter in the corner with her machine. Me appearing via secure video link from Coleman's hospital guest suite. I wanted to be there in person, wanted to look Brenda in the eye, but Alicia said video was better. Let her see you safe, protected, surrounded by people who believe you. Let her understand she can't reach you anymore. Brenda's attorney opened with sympathy, practiced concern. Mrs. Croft has suffered a difficult health crisis. Cognitive decline is tragic but common in elderly patients. My client has only acted in Eleanor's best interests, protecting assets during a vulnerable time. Settlement without admission is erasure with paperwork. Subscribe. The public phase is next, and it's surgical. Alicia let him finish. Then she opened the ledger, placed it on the table where everyone could see. 26 years of documentation, every page logged, every decision witnessed. Let's discuss Mrs. Croft's cognitive decline, Alicia said. Her voice was ice and precision. March 15th, Eleanor approved a $50,000 grant with detailed stipulations. March 28th, she guest lectured at UGA. Student evaluations called her the most engaged speaker of the semester. April 3rd, she conducted a comprehensive facility review in Miami. She slid printouts across the table, emails, lecture slides, photos with timestamps. April 19th, your client began suggesting Eleanor was confused. May 8th, your client photographed foundation documents without permission. May 15th, Eleanor was hospitalized, not for a stroke, but for dehydration and stress. Brenda's attorney shifted. Mrs. Croft was exhibiting confusion. My client was concerned. By creating a Delaware shell corporation? Alicia interrupted. She placed the next document. Vance Corps Foundation, registered 8 months ago. Officers listed, B. Vance and S. Croft, except Serafina never signed these documents. Forensic analysis report, signature comparison, my real signature versus the forged ones. The pressure was different. The loops were wrong. The pen type didn't match any I owned. Alicia played Professor Linwood's lecture footage. 10 minutes of me discussing Civil War correspondence preservation, sharp, clear, answering student questions with detailed historical context. Does this woman appear cognitively impaired? Alicia asked. Brenda's composure started cracking. Small things. Her jaw tightened. Her fingers pressed white against her pearl necklace. Eleanor was confused, Brenda said, speaking for the first time. I was protecting the foundation, protecting assets from poor decisions. By forging her signature 53 times? Alicia slid another stack across the table. Every forged document, every fake transfer, every stolen authorization. By contacting private collectors to sell historical archives? By funneling $230,000 to your personal accounts? The court reporter's fingers flew, every word documented. Permanent record. These families donated their histories to the Vance Foundation, Alicia continued. She showed photos of the archives, letters, photographs, documents that families had trusted us to preserve forever. You were going to sell them to the highest bidder. Brenda's attorney called for a recess. 40 minutes later, they returned with a settlement offer. Brenda would resign, return the money, no criminal charges, no public admission of wrongdoing. Mrs. Croft, her attorney said to my video screen, this allows everyone to move forward with dignity. We can avoid a costly public legal battle. Take settlement or force exposure? What's your move? I looked at Alicia, at Warren, at Coleman standing in my doorway, at David's photo on the desk beside me. Declined, I said. I want a public accounting. Every forged signature documented in court records, every stolen dollar traced in public filings, every family who trusted me deserves to know their history was nearly sold and who tried to sell it. Brenda stood abruptly. Her chair scraped loud against the floor. She leaned toward the camera, close enough that I could see her makeup creasing. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Good, I said. She left, heels clicking sharp against marble floors. Her attorneys followed, briefcases heavy with evidence they couldn't refute. Alicia closed her laptop. Next stop, medical records. Let's destroy the incompetence claim completely. Dr. Patel had treated me for 32 years. Brenda never asked him for records because he'd have refused. He'd been my physician since David and I moved to Atlanta in 1993, knew my medical history better than I did, every annual physical, every minor procedure, every cognitive assessment I'd taken as part of routine senior wellness checks. Warren subpoenaed his records for the case. Dr. Patel didn't just comply, he volunteered to testify. His affidavit arrived 3 days after the deposition, 12 pages, detailed. Devastating. Patient Serafina Croft, age 78, cognitive function tests administered annually since 2015. Most recent test, February 2025. Score 29-30 on mini mental state examination. This places patient in normal cognition range for her age group. February, 3 months before my hospitalization. 3 months before Brenda claimed I was too confused to manage my own affairs. Dr. Patel's notes continued. Patient presented to emergency room May 15, 2025, accompanied by daughter-in-law, Brenda Vance. Diagnosis, dehydration, elevated blood pressure, acute stress response, no indicators of stroke, no neurological deficits observed. No stroke. Brenda had told everyone I'd had a stroke, told Nurse Davis, told my attorney, told board members, built her entire incompetence claim on a stroke that never happened. Patient's daughter-in-law refused my consultation, Dr. Patel wrote. Hospital records show I attempted contact 6 times. Each request was blocked by family member claiming patient preference for new care team. I never requested a new care team, never told anyone to refuse Dr. Patel's calls. Brenda had isolated me medically the same way she'd isolated me legally and socially. The affidavit included Dr. Patel's notes from my last office visit, April 7, 2025, 5 weeks before hospitalization. Patient alert, oriented, concerned about family dynamics, reports daughter-in-law pressuring her to sign documents. Patient specifically requested documentation of cognitive capacity. States, I need proof I'm thinking clearly in case anyone questions it later. One doctor's integrity stopped a legal erasure. Ever been that witness? I'd forgotten that conversation. But past Eleanor, already sensing danger, had protected future Eleanor, had asked Dr. Patel to document everything. He'd written in bold at the bottom of that note, cognitive capacity, intact. Patient demonstrates clear reasoning, appropriate concern, and forward planning. This note is written at patient's explicit request for potential legal protection. Nurse Davis, the young nurse from that first hospital scene, provided her own statement. Alicia had contacted her separately. I felt pressured by Ms. Brenda Vance to document confusion and disorientation, Davis wrote. When I suggested Mrs. Eleanor Vance seemed lucid, Ms. Brenda became insistent that the stroke had caused cognitive issues. I documented per family report rather than my own clinical observation. I regret this decision. Dr. Patel's final note, dated May 14th, the day before my hospitalization, included one line that made everything clear. Patient called expressing fear of daughter-in-law seeking improper control of finances. Cognitive capacity during call, fully intact. Patient requested my testimony if needed. I agreed. The medical evidence was complete. No stroke, no confusion, no decline. Just a systematic campaign to make me look incompetent, and one doctor who refused to participate. The antiquities dealer didn't expect a subpoena. He especially didn't expect the FBI. Silas Blackwood ran a high-end rare documents gallery in New York, specialized in Civil War correspondence, Reconstruction-era materials, early American manuscripts, the kind of dealer who knew provenance mattered more than price. He'd been contacted 4 weeks earlier by VCF Administration LLC. Email inquiry about purchasing a collection of Civil War letters, 107 pieces from Union soldiers stationed in Georgia. Estimated value, $1.2 million. Blackwood was interested. That collection had been legendary among archivists. But something felt wrong. The provenance documentation didn't match, he told FBI agent Morris. They claimed ownership through Vance Corps Foundation. But when I checked historical records, that collection was donated to Vance Care Foundation in 2001. Different entity entirely. Blackwood had done what ethical dealers do. He'd verified, called contacts, checked registration records, found the discrepancy. I reported to the FBI art crime team before completing any transaction, his statement read. The seller was pressuring fast completion, offering below-market pricing, classic red flags for stolen or fraudulently obtained materials. Agent Morris's investigation had gone deeper. Blackwood wasn't the only dealer contacted. Brenda's shell company had reached out to 3 high-end galleries. Dealer 2, Reconstruction-era photographs. Value, $890,000. Dealer 3, Jim Crow documentation and oral history recordings. Value, $2.6 million. Total planned liquidation, $4.7 million. And she wasn't stealing money, she was erasing history. Subscribe, the resolution is public, permanent, and recorded. But these weren't just my archives. They were donated by families. The Torres family had given us their grandfather's Civil War letters in 2001 after their mother passed. They'd trusted the Vance Foundation to preserve them forever, to make them available to researchers, to honor their grandfather's service. The Morrison family had donated Reconstruction photographs. Their great-grandmother had been one of the first Black teachers in Atlanta after the war. Those photos documented education, resistance, survival. The Jenkins family had recorded their grandmother's oral history of living through Jim Crow Atlanta. Hours of testimony, painful memories shared so future generations would understand. These families had trusted me, trusted David, trusted that their histories would be protected. Brenda was going to sell them to private collectors who'd lock them away, make them inaccessible, turn family history into investment portfolios. Federal charges were now possible: wire fraud, forgery, theft of cultural property. The FBI took archival theft seriously. These weren't just valuable objects, they were pieces of American history. Agent Morris came to Atlanta, met with me, Alessia, and Warren in Coleman's office. Young guy, serious, carried himself like someone who understood the weight of what he was investigating. "Mrs. Croft," he said, "we have enough evidence to prosecute. Wire fraud carries up to 20 years. But I need to know what you want. Restitution, prosecution, both? Mercy or justice? Which would you choose?" I thought about the Torres family, about Mrs. B. Morrison's great-grandmother teaching freed slaves to read, about Mrs. Jenkins recording her grandmother's story with tears running down her face. "I want the families who trusted me to know their history is safe," I said. "I want every archive returned to proper custody. I want legal protections that prevent this from ever happening again." "And Brenda?" Agent Morris asked. "I want her to understand that history isn't for sale, and neither am I." The Foundation Board convened without Brenda for the first time in 8 months. The silence was a verdict. Emergency meeting. Foundation headquarters in Atlanta, mahogany table that David and I had chosen together in 1998, the same room where we'd approved our first scholarship, where we'd celebrated 25 years of service, where Brenda had sat for the last 8 months, pretending she belonged. I attended via video from Coleman's guest suite, still recovering but stable enough to be discharged soon. My voice was stronger now, my mind clearer than it had been in weeks. Warren stood at the head of the table. Spread the forensic report across the surface where everyone could see. Shell entity, forged documents, frozen accounts now released, attempted sale of donated archives, FBI investigation, every detail documented. "The evidence is comprehensive," Warren said. "Ms. Brenda Vance created a fraudulent foundation, forged Serafina's signature 53 times, and attempted to liquidate $4.7 million in historical archives. Callista Reed, board member, friend, ally, spoke first. I move that we remove Brenda Vance from all foundation roles immediately, restore Serafina's sole authority, and issue a public statement clarifying what happened. The vote was unanimous. 7 board members, 7 yes votes, 0 discussion needed. Strongest leadership move, forgiveness or firewall. Callista proposed the public statement, but I asked to draft it myself. Needed the words to come from me. Needed families to hear my voice, not lawyer language. I wrote it on Coleman's tablet while the board waited, read it aloud through the video link. The Vance Foundation was built on trust. Trust between donors and stewards, between families and history, between past and future. Recent events tested that trust. I'm grateful to the allies who stood witness when I couldn't speak for myself. To Mr. Coleman, who remembered a portrait. To Dr. Patel, who documented truth. To Attorney Alicia Torres and Mr. Warren, who built the case for justice. To Professor Linwood, Dr. Rashid, and Callista Reed, who refused to let me be erased. Coleman stood in my doorway while I read. His eyes were wet. We're implementing new governance standards, I continued. Dual authorization for all financial transactions, annual independent audits, public board minutes. These protocols honor David's memory and protect every family who trusted us with their history. Our work continues, not despite this betrayal, but informed by it. Warren's relieved exhale was audible through the video feed. The board approved the statement. Scheduled a press release for the following morning, Callista had one more proposal. Eleanor, we'd like to name these new protocols after you, the Serafina Croft Governance Standards. So every foundation leader who comes after us remembers why transparency matters. I wanted to say no, didn't want my name on something born from Brenda's theft, but Callista was right. Future leaders needed to understand that vulnerability wasn't weakness and that documentation was protection. Only if David's name is included, I said. The Vance Governance Standards, both of us, the way it was always meant to be. Approved, documented, made permanent. The meeting adjourned at 6:47 p.m. At 6:49, Warren's phone rang, Brenda's attorney. Formal notification of unconditional withdrawal from all foundation roles. Return of all funds. Relinquishment of all claims. No settlement, no negotiation. Complete surrender. She's done, Warren said, hanging up. It's over. But it wasn't over. Not quite. I still had 2 things left to do. First, rebuild trust with the families whose archives had nearly been sold. Second, stand in front of the community that had trusted me and show them I was still here, still protecting what mattered, still worthy of the foundation David and I built. Coleman helped me schedule it. Miami Pavilion, 25th anniversary celebration, 6 weeks away, enough time to heal. Enough time to prepare. Enough time to reclaim my life completely. No confession, just a 1-page letter citing personal circumstances and family privacy. Brenda's attorney delivered it by courier, white envelope, formal letterhead. 1 sheet of paper that said everything without saying anything. Ms. Brenda Vance hereby resigns from all roles associated with the Vance Care Foundation. She relinquishes any claims to authority, assets, or decision-making capacity. Fund restitution of $230,000 plus interest will be completed through structured payments from liquidated Charleston property. No apology. No admission of wrongdoing. Just legal language that meant, I lost and I know it. The legal record told the real story. Court filings, forensic reports, FBI documentation. Anyone who looked would find 53 forged signatures, would find the Delaware Shell Company, would find proof of attempted cultural property theft. Brenda got to keep her public dignity, but the truth was preserved forever in documents she couldn't erase. Closure without confrontation, cowardice or class. A second envelope arrived with the resignation. Private letter. My name handwritten on the front. Brenda's handwriting, the same hand that had forged my signature so many times. I didn't open it. Placed it in an archival folder with the case file, dated it, logged it in my ledger. but didn't read whatever excuse or justification she'd written inside. Some words don't deserve witnesses. Coleman visited that afternoon, brought discharge papers and an offer. Eleanor, the hospital board would like to offer you an honorary position, patient advocacy oversight. Help us build protocols so what happened to you can't happen to other vulnerable patients. I accepted, but only on one condition. Governance training, I said. Every patient advocate needs to understand financial exploitation warning signs, needs to know when family concern becomes family control, needs to be empowered to document and report. Coleman agreed. We'd start developing the program after I'd rested, after I'd attended the Miami celebration, after I'd proven to myself that I could stand in public again without fear. Warren brought the final financial reports that evening. Every stolen dollar traced, every forged check documented. Brenda's Charleston property was already listed for sale. Structured payments would begin within 60 days. The foundation accounts are fully restored, Warren said. Stronger protections in place. Independent oversight established. You're safe, Eleanor. Safe. I tested the word, rolled it around in my mind. After months of isolation and manipulation, safety felt foreign. But I wasn't the same Eleanor who'd drunk cold metallic tea in her study. Wasn't the weak patient dismissed as confused. I'd fought back with documents and witnesses and truth preserved in ledgers and cornerstones. I'd learned that safety wasn't something given. It was something built, protected, documented. Afternoon light slanted through Coleman's windows, warm, golden. I signed the acceptance papers with my fountain pen, the same pen David and I had used to sign the original foundation charter. My signature was steady, clear, unmistakably mine. I scheduled my first post-recovery public appearance for November 12th, Miami Pavilion, 25th anniversary celebration. Brenda's invitation was revoked, but my portrait remained in the lobby, exactly where it belonged. The archive room smelled like old paper and second chances. 6 weeks after the board meeting, I stood in Foundation headquarters. Back in Atlanta, back in the building David and I had designed, back among the collections we'd spent 26 years preserving. Professor Linwood walked beside me. His steady presence reminded me why this work mattered, why fighting Brenda had been worth every exhausting moment. Row after row of climate-controlled archives, each collection tagged with the donor family name and my original acquisition notes, the Torres family Civil War letters, the Morrison Reconstruction photographs, the Jenkins oral histories, all safe, all protected, all exactly where they were supposed to be. But I needed to do more than preserve them. I needed to rebuild trust. I contacted 12 families whose archives had been part of Brenda's planned liquidation, called each one personally, explained what had happened, apologized for the violation of their trust, invited them to verify their holdings personally. The Torres family came first, Miguel Torres and his daughter Carmen. They donated Miguel's grandfather's letters back in 2001. Mrs. Vance, Miguel said, holding one of the letters with archival gloves, we trusted you 24 years ago. Nothing that happened changes that. You fought to protect our grandfather's story. That's all we needed to know. Carmen hugged me, careful, gentle, like I was fragile. Maybe I was. Maybe we all were. She turned betrayal into legacy reinforcement. Subscribe. Her final public statement redefines institutional trust. The Morrison family visited next, then the Jenkins family, then 9 more families over 3 weeks. Every single one expressed support. 3 families offered additional donations, materials they'd been holding back, waiting to see if we were trustworthy. We were. David and I had built something strong enough to survive betrayal. Professor Linwood helped me establish the David Vance Memorial Archive Access Program, free digitization for underserved communities, free research access for students, free educational programming for schools that couldn't afford field trips. David always said history belongs to everyone, I told Professor Linwood. not just people who can afford private collections. New security protocols went into effect, dual authorization for any collection movement, annual independent audits, public board minutes posted quarterly, digital backups stored in 3 separate locations, the Vance Governance Standards, named for both of us the way it should be. I wore archival cotton gloves while reviewing the Civil War letters. The climate control hummed, steady and reliable. My tears fell on one letter, carefully so I wouldn't damage it, because I'd almost lost this, almost let Brenda sell off pieces of American history to the highest bidder. What would you preserve for a future you'll never see? A sealed envelope arrived that afternoon. FBI letterhead, Agent Morris's signature. Case closed. No prosecution per victim request. Cultural property secured. Federal watch list updated with shell entity information. Archives protected under enhanced custody protocols. I filed it next to David's ledger in the vault box. Evidence preserved. Truth documented. History safe. That night, alone in my study, I made the final ledger entry. Date, November 10th, 2025. Event, archive restoration complete. Trust rebuilt. Legacy secured. Witness, Eleanor Vance Code, DV forever David's initials. Forever protection. The way he'd planned from the beginning. 2 days until Miami. 2 days until I stood in public and showed everyone that Serafina Croft was still here. Still fighting. Still preserving. Still witnessing. The Miami sun felt different than hospital fluorescence. Warmer, earned. November 12th, 2025. Geriatric Pavilion 25th Anniversary Celebration. 200 guests. Media coverage. Community leaders. Foundation donors. Everyone who'd supported David's and my work over nearly 3 decades. I walked through the main entrance with my cane. Needed it for balance, not shame. Strength looks different at 78. My portrait hung in the lobby, unchanged. But there was something new beside it, a plaque that hadn't been there before. Serafina Croft, founder, protector, witness. Coleman had commissioned it, had it installed the week before without telling me. When I saw it, my throat tightened. Protector. Because I'd fought back. Witness. Because I documented everything. Dr. Rashid introduced me, told the story of the cornerstone, of the documents we'd preserved in stone 27 years ago, of how planning and faith had protected truth when someone tried to erase it. Standing ovation. I stood tall with my cane, accepting what I'd earned through survival. My speech was brief, thanked Coleman, the scholarship recipient who became CEO and remembered a portrait. Thanked Alicia, who built the legal case with precision and fury. Thanked Warren, who never stopped calling. Thanked Dr. Patel, who documented truth when documentation mattered most. David and I built this pavilion because we believed healthcare should honor dignity, I said. My voice carried through the atrium. Strong. Clear. Mine. Recent events tested that belief, but this community proved that dignity isn't given. It's defended. By people who remember. By people who document. By people who refuse to let truth be erased. Legacy isn't what you build. It's who builds because of you. Agree? I announced the new Patient Advocacy Fund, $500,000 from recovered assets, matching donations from 3 board members, money that would train advocates to recognize financial exploitation, to document concerns, to protect vulnerable patients the way Coleman and his team had protected me. Coleman stepped forward, handed me a framed object, the cornerstone key, the one David had encoded, the one that had unlocked truth when we needed it most. This belongs to you, Coleman said, but it also belongs to everyone this foundation serves, a reminder that truth doesn't disappear. It waits to be found. Salt air drifted through the open atrium. Orchids lined the stage, purple, David's favorite color. My hand stayed steady on the podium even when emotion threatened to shake it. After the formal program, guests approached, dozens of them, sharing stories of how the foundation had helped them, how David's architecture had created healing spaces, how my archival work had preserved their family histories. I listened, remembered why the fight had mattered. A young woman waited until the crowd thinned, early 20s, nervous but determined. She held a folder with the Foundation Scholarship logo. "Mrs. Croft, I'm Lyra Evans. I'm this year's scholarship recipient, like Mr. Coleman was 30 years ago. I study elder law now because of your story, because of what you survived and how you fought back." Lyra Evans, daughter or granddaughter of the notary who'd witnessed our original charter, family legacy continuing through education and advocacy. "What you documented saved you," Lyra said. "I want to help other people understand that power. Want to teach them that silence isn't surrender. Documentation is resistance." I hugged her, passed the lesson forward, trusted that what David and I built would outlive us both. The Miami sun set over the pavilion, warm light, earned peace, community embrace. I'd come home, not to the hospital where Brenda had trapped me, but to the legacy that had set me free. They didn't applaud loudly when I returned to my Atlanta study. The house simply sighed, relieved. Late afternoon, November 15th, 3 days after Miami. Home. My study looked the same. Archival shelves, David's worn leather chair, the squeaky third drawer that he'd never fixed, afternoon light slanting through windows the way it had for 32 years. But everything felt different, reclaimed. I replaced the foundation binder on its shelf, right side up this time, spine facing out the way it belonged, locked the desk drawer, tested the squeak, still there, comforting, permanent. Some things don't need fixing. David's college yearbook sat on my desk. I opened it carefully, removed the tape residue where the vault key had been hidden for 30 years, tucked his photo inside instead, him in his graduation robe, young and hopeful and certain we'd build something good. We had, despite everything, despite Brenda. We'd built something strong enough to survive. Thank you notes covered my desk. The Torres family, the Morrison family, 12 families whose archives I'd protected, board members, allies, witnesses. I framed 3 notes, hung them next to David's portrait in my study, evidence of trust rebuilt, of community restored. The ledger sat open on my desk. Final entry time. Date, November 15, 2025. Event, full restoration complete. Foundation secure, legacy protected, lesson learned. Witness, Serafina Croft. Note, trust is built in decades, stolen in moments, and restored through witnesses who refuse silence. I wrote one more document that afternoon, letter to future foundation leaders, to be sealed and opened in 2050. 25 years from now, when I'd be long gone and new people would carry this work forward. If you're reading this, you're responsible for something David and I built with love and intention. Protect it fiercely. Document everything. Trust people who remember when others forget. And understand that the strongest foundations are built not on money, but on witnesses who refuse to let truth disappear. Signed it. Sealed it, added it to the vault box for the bank. Cold tea, warm tea. I made myself lavender tea, watched it steam, drank it warm this time, sitting in David's chair surrounded by the archives we'd built together. The squeaky drawer reminded me permanence isn't about perfection, it's about things that last despite their flaws. Erasure, inscription. Brenda had tried to erase me from my own legacy. Instead, she'd forced me to document it so thoroughly that future generations would know exactly what we'd built and why. Silence. Witness. I'd stayed quiet in that hospital room, counting pen clicks and door distances, but silence had become strategy. Documentation had become defense. Witnesses had become my army. Evening crickets started their song outside my window. I'd planted new lavender there last week, reclaiming the scent, making it mine again instead of Brenda's poisoned offering. David's aftershave sat on my desk, his cologne bottle nearly empty after 15 years. I applied a tiny drop to my wrist. Ritual maintained. Memory honored. Love that doesn't end just because someone dies. Thanks for walking with me through erasure to restoration. If my refusal to be silenced inspired you, hit that like button. Subscribe for stories where dignity defeats deceit and where one person's ledger can rewrite justice. Drop the one line from this journey you'll carry with you. Remember, the most powerful resistance isn't loud, it's documented. I placed the ledger back in the vault box, added the court records, added the FBI letter, added the cornerstone documentation, added Brenda's unopened letter, preserved but unread, the way some history needs to be acknowledged without being honored. Locked the box, not hidden, preserved. Open sky visible through study windows, cool evening air. The story finally written in a hand that won't be erased. What does it take to reclaim your life when someone weaponizes your vulnerability? For me, it took a ledger, a cornerstone, a portrait, and witnesses who refused to forget. David had known, had prepared me without my understanding, had built protections into foundations literal and metaphorical. I was 78 years old, tired, scarred, stronger than I'd ever been, and I was still here, still witnessing, still protecting, still building. The work continues.